Have you ever found yourself standing in the middle of a loud party, surrounded by a cacophony of laughter and clinking glasses, yet feeling more profoundly alone than you ever have in silence? A strange sensation, as if you're watching a foreign film without subtitles. Everyone else seems to know the lines, to understand the intricate dance of social cues, but you've forgotten your part. You feel like an anthropologist studying a foreign tribe, present in body but absent in spirit, a ghost at the feast. If this feeling resonates, if you felt a growing distance between yourself and the world you once effortlessly inhabited, then what you are about to hear is not a diagnosis, but a validation. A quiet phenomenon is unfolding, a subtle but seismic shift happening just beneath the surface of our collective consciousness. It's a kind of vanishing. Not a dramatic exit, not a theatrical announcement, but a quiet dissolving. People are stepping back, fading into the edges, choosing the clarity of silence over the chaos of noise. They are performing what I call the great unplugging. And if you felt this gravitational pull yourself, if you've wondered why the small talk feels more draining than running a marathon, why the performances feel hollow and the social rituals seem absurd, then know this. This withdrawal is not a sickness. It is not antisocial behavior. It is perhaps the most sane response to an increasingly insane environment. It is a symptom not of breakdown, but of breakthrough. It is the first courageous step of waking up. To understand what's happening, we must look beyond the individual and see the pattern in the culture. The great resignation that swept across America wasn't just about jobs. It was a mass rejection of a value system. It was millions of people waking up and realizing that the ladder of success was leaning against the wrong wall. The trend of quiet quitting isn't merely about workplace disengagement. It's a conservation of life force, a refusal to pour precious energy into systems that offer no meaning in return. This is the modern echo of a profound American impulse, the same one that drove Henry David Thoreau to Walden Pond nearly 2 centuries ago, the impulse to step away from lives of quiet desperation and discover what life is truly about when you strip away the noise. But what does it mean to wake up in this context? I'm not referring to a sudden mystical enlightenment. I'm talking about the moment the veil drops. The moment you see that, so much of what we call normal life is a form of sleepwalking. People are playing roles assigned to them at birth, repeating lines they've absorbed from the cultural script, moving through routines with no awareness that they are, in fact, asleep at the wheel of their own lives. When you're asleep yourself, this poses no problem. You fit right in. The game is the only reality you know. You can have conversations about nothing and feel a sense of connection. You can chase promotions, accolades, and possessions, believing they will bring you lasting fulfillment. You can build your identity on the shifting sands of other people's opinions and call it security. But the moment your eyes truly open, the moment you see the machinery behind the stage, everything changes. Suddenly, you are like a person who has stumbled out of a dark movie theater into the blinding midday sun. Your eyes ache, the world seems too bright, too loud, and when you try to go back inside, when you try to sit down and lose yourself in the flickering images on the screen again, you find you can't. Because you now know it's just light and shadow. You know the drama isn't real. You've seen through the illusion. This is the precipice where so many find themselves today. They can no longer participate in the collective dream, not because they feel superior or more enlightened, but because their very nervous system has begun to reject it. It's a deep, visceral intolerance for inauthenticity. And here we touch upon the first layer of this phenomenon, a layer rooted not in philosophy, but in neuropsychology. Think of your consciousness as a highly advanced operating system. For years, it has been running hundreds of social applications in the background, consuming immense processing power. There's the worry about what others think, XE app, constantly scanning for approval. There's the perform success, VBS script, demanding you project an image of having it all together. There's the maintain small talk, BAT program, filling every silence with pleasantries. For a sleepwalking person, these programs run on autopilot. But when you awaken, you gain administrative access. You suddenly become aware of how much energy, how much mental RAM each of these programs consumes. You realize that your system is constantly on the verge of crashing, that your internal fan is always whirring, that you are suffering from a catastrophic case of spiritual and psychological burnout. Your system is overloaded. The constant input of social media outrage, the pressure to maintain a personal brand, the demand to have an opinion on everything, the performance of endless positivity, it creates a state of chronic hyperarousal. Your nervous system was never designed for this. It was designed for genuine connection, for periods of quiet reflection, for engagement with the real, tangible world. So, the withdrawal, the disappearing, is an act of profound self-preservation. It is your system automatically entering safe mode to prevent a total shutdown. It begins to close the non-essential, energy-draining applications. You stop arguing with strangers online. You stop attending gatherings that feel like an obligation. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Each act of unplugging frees up a little more bandwidth, a little more processing power, allowing your core operating system, your true self, to finally breathe and come online. This process begins subtly. It's a slow fade. You find more joy in a walk in the woods than in a night at a bar. You find more wisdom in a book than in a news feed. You find more connection in a deep conversation with one person than in a party with 50. You are not rejecting people. You are rejecting the static that prevents real connection. You are choosing a signal with clarity over a signal with volume. This is the beginning of a sacred journey inward. It is the soul's demand for authenticity over applause. But unplugging from the machine is one thing. Understanding its code is another. It forces you to confront the most terrifying and liberating question of all. When all the roles you play are stripped away, when the audience is gone and the stage is empty, who is actually there? What happens when you realize that the script you were handed at birth was never designed for your character to be free? And what terrifying, beautiful truth is revealed when you finally decide to go off script? Remember when you were a child. Remember a time when laughter was an uncontrollable explosion, not a polite response. When tears were a storm that passed, not a vulnerability to be hidden. When you could stare at a bug on the sidewalk for 10 minutes, utterly captivated, without feeling the pressure to be productive. In that state, you were not performing, you were simply being. So when did the performance begin? When did we learn to trade the raw, messy truth of our inner world for a polished, socially acceptable avatar? There isn't a single moment. It's a slow, insidious process. It begins with a parent saying, "Don't cry," a teacher saying, "Sit still," a peer group rewarding conformity and punishing deviation. We learn piece by piece that the applause of the audience is more important than the integrity of the actor. And so we begin to perform. This performance operates on a kind of unspoken agreement, a social contract that allows the whole show to continue. I call it the great pretending. We all agree to pretend that the roles we play are who we really are. We pretend that the carefully curated highlight reels on social media reflect the full spectrum of human experience. We pretend that our job titles define our worth, that busyness is a badge of honor, and that the opinions we absorb from the 24-hour news cycle are the product of our own deep contemplation. For this collective play to work, everyone must stay in character. Everyone must agree that the emperor is, in fact, wearing beautiful new clothes. The entire structure is built on a foundation of shared, unacknowledged delusion. If this sounds like an exaggeration, consider the classic conformity experiments conducted by psychologist Solomon Asch in the 1,950 seconds. Imagine you're a participant. You walk into a room with 7 other people, believing you're all part of a simple visual perception test. You're shown a card with a single line on it and another card with 3 lines of varying length. Your task is laughably easy. State which of the 3 lines matches the first one. The first couple of rounds go smoothly. Everyone agrees on the obvious answer. Then, on the 3rd round, something strange happens. The first person confidently gives a blatantly wrong answer. The second person agrees with them, and the third, and the fourth. Now it's your turn. You can feel your heart begin to pound. You look at the lines, the answer is as clear as day. But 7 people before you have all pointed to the sky and called it green. The pressure is immense. Do you trust the evidence of your own eyes, or do you bend to the consensus of the group? In Ash's experiments, a staggering 75% of participants conformed to the group's incorrect answer at least once. They were willing to deny the reality right in front of their faces to avoid the discomfort of standing alone. This is the social matrix in action. It's the invisible force in the boardroom that keeps you from questioning a bad idea. It's the pressure at the family dinner table that silences your true political or spiritual beliefs. It's the algorithm on your phone that feeds you a version of reality that everyone in your bubble agrees with. The matrix isn't a conspiracy. It's a collective comfort zone built on the fear of being an outsider. When you begin to awaken, you don't just see this pattern. You feel its code running in every interaction. You start to see the motive behind the action, the fear behind the confidence, the emptiness behind the hustle. You watch someone post their outrage on the public square, and you no longer see a righteous warrior for justice. You see their unhealed trauma desperately seeking a target, a way to project their inner pain onto an external enemy. When society divides itself into us and them, left and right, believer and atheist, vaxxed and unvaxxed, you no longer see a battle between good and evil. You see 2 shadows, cast from the same source of fear, boxing with each other in the dark, each side defining itself by what it hates. You see a grand, tragic distraction designed to keep anyone from doing the one thing that could actually change the world, looking in the mirror. And once you see this, you cannot unsee it. This is the point of no return. You cannot go back to taking it all seriously. You cannot participate in the blame, the judgment, and the performative anger, because you understand it is all just one big projection, one massive collective game of pointing at others to avoid looking at ourselves. This is where the second, deeper layer of this withdrawal comes into play. It moves beyond a psychological or neurological reaction and becomes an ethical imperative. The discomfort of participating in the game is no longer just a feeling. It's a crisis of conscience. It starts to feel like a betrayal of the truth you have seen. It starts to feel like complicity. Every time you offer a polite, vacant smile in a meeting you know is pointless. Every time you nod along to gossip that you know is harmful. Every time you like a post that celebrates a version of success you know is a lie, you feel a small part of your soul wither. You realize you are not just a passive observer in this play, you are an active participant. You are handing the emperor his invisible clothes. You are contributing another brick to the wall of the very prison that confines you and everyone else. Staying in the game now requires you to actively lie, not just to others, but to yourself. It demands that you anesthetize your own clarity, that you dim your own light to match the wattage of the room. And your soul, that core part of you that knows truth, begins to scream in protest. It says, stop, stop performing, stop pretending. Stop betraying what you know to be true for the temporary comfort of belonging. This ethical crisis is the true catalyst for the great unplugging. It's the moment you realize that your personal integrity is more valuable than your social acceptance. This is when you start looking for the scissors. You see the intricate, almost invisible strings of societal expectation, of cultural programming, of familial obligation that have been attached to you your whole life, dictating your movements, your thoughts, your emotions, and you realize you have a choice, a terrifying, electrifying choice. You can continue to be a marionette dancing on the stage for the approval of an audience that is also made of marionettes, or you can cut the strings. You can choose the terrifying, uncertain freedom of the free fall over the predictable safety of the performance. The great withdrawal, then, is not an act of surrender. It is an act of rebellion. It is the ultimate declaration of sovereignty. It's the moment you stop asking the world for permission to be yourself. But what happens when the strings are cut? What awaits you in that silent, untethered descent, when the only thing left to hold on to is yourself? Society has a terrifying word for the state you enter after cutting the strings: loneliness. It's painted as a failure, a void, a social disease. We are taught from birth that to be alone is to be unwanted. But what if that's the greatest lie of all? What if the most excruciating loneliness isn't found in solitude, but in a crowded room where you are performing a version of yourself that is no longer true? That is the loneliness of the soul, a loneliness that feels like suffocation. When the spiritually awake person withdraws, they are not stepping into loneliness. They are making a desperate escape from it. They are finally leaving the crowd of strangers to have a conversation with the only person they haven't truly met in years, themselves. This is the critical distinction between loneliness and aloneness. Loneliness is an ache for connection when you are surrounded by mismatched frequencies. It's the static you feel when your soul is speaking one language and the world around you is speaking another. Aloneness, or solitude, is the glorious, expansive silence that occurs when the static finally stops. It is not the absence of others, it is the presence of yourself. In this quiet space, away from the noise, the performance, and the constant projection of others' expectations, you finally come home. You begin to hear your own thoughts without the relentless filter of what will they think. You can finally feel your own emotions without absorbing the anxiety and drama of everyone around you. You can finally ask not what the world wants from you, but what your deepest self actually desires, what it believes, who it truly is. But let's be very clear. This phase, what we might call the hermit phase, is not a spa retreat for the soul. It is not a gentle period of navel-gazing. It is a crucible. A crucible is a vessel used in alchemy, designed to withstand immense heat, to purify substances and transform them into something new. And that is precisely what this period is for. It is the most challenging, courageous, and essential work a human being can undertake. This is where you begin the process that the great psychologist Carl Jung calls shadow work. Your shadow is not the evil part of you. It is simply all the parts of yourself that you were taught to disown and hide in order to be accepted, loved, and deemed good. It's your repressed anger, your hidden jealousy, your deep-seated fears, your profound insecurities. In the busy, distracting world, we can spend our entire lives running from this shadow, projecting it onto others. We see our own greed in the corrupt politician, our own arrogance in the boastful colleague, our own undealt with anger in the road-raging driver. But in the crucible of solitude, there is nowhere left to run. There are no screens to distract you, no parties to numb you, no scapegoats to blame. You must turn and face the dragon you've been fleeing your entire life. And you discover it was never a dragon at all. It was just a wounded, neglected, and terrified part of yourself, begging for your attention. The inner work is this. When you feel a surge of judgment towards someone else, you learn to ask, what part of myself am I seeing in them? When you feel a pang of intense envy, you learn to ask, what unmet longing within me is this person reflecting back? When you feel consumed by righteous anger at the world, you learn to sit with it long enough to feel the profound sadness and personal pain that lies beneath it. This is brutally difficult work. It is the process of taking back all the projections you have cast onto the world. It means taking absolute responsibility for your own emotional state. You can no longer blame your parents, your ex-partners, your society, or your boss for your suffering. You realize that you are not a victim of your life, but the sole creator of your inner experience. You do this alone because no one else can do it for you. Your healing is your responsibility. During this time, you are integrating, you are processing decades of absorbed unconsciousness. You are healing the deep wounds that came from the constant, low-grade trauma of pretending to be someone you're not. You are developing the spiritual spine necessary to stand in your own truth, even if the entire world tells you you're wrong. You are not escaping the fire. You are stepping into the forge. And here is the beautiful alchemical secret. Once you have done this work, once you have looked your shadow in the eye and embraced it, once you have healed your wounds and found your authentic center, something extraordinary happens. You are no longer dependent on the outside world for your sense of reality. You no longer need approval, validation, or belonging from others to feel whole. You have forged your own internal anchor in the heart of the storm. You have found something far more precious than social acceptance. You have found yourself. This is true sovereignty. It's a quiet, unshakable confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. It's a deep peace that persists even amidst chaos. It's the feeling of being rooted like an ancient tree, no longer swayed by the shifting winds of public opinion. This alchemical process transforms you from the inside out. But once the lead has been turned to gold in the silence of the alchemist's lab, it cannot remain hidden forever. Its very nature is to radiate. So the question then becomes, what happens next? How does a person who is no longer dependent on the world's approval re-engage with that very world, not as a participant seeking a role, but as something else entirely? There's a common misconception about enlightenment, a caricature fed to us by stories and films. We imagine a solitary figure ascending a misty mountain, finding the ultimate truth, and then remaining there, detached and smiling serenely, forever removed from the messy affairs of the world below. But this is only half the story. The true challenge, the second half of the journey, is not to stay on the mountaintop. It's to learn how to bring the expansive view from the summit back down into the crowded, chaotic marketplace. A person who has passed through the crucible of solitude does not return to society to pick up the script they dropped. The old roles no longer fit. The old costumes feel absurd. They cannot go back to being a sleepwalker. Instead, they return as something new, something that doesn't quite fit into the old categories. They become what I call a border dweller. A border dweller is someone who learns to live with one foot in the world of awakened consciousness and one foot in the ordinary, everyday world. They are the bridge between the seen and the unseen, the silent and the spoken. They are present in society, but not absorbed by it. They are available to others, but not dependent on their validation. They can engage with the game, but they are no longer entangled in its drama. They remember that it is a game. Think of the quintessential American example, Ram Dass. Here was Richard Alpert, a respected Harvard professor, a man who had reached the pinnacle of academic success in the Western world. He had played the game and won. But an inner emptiness led him on a journey to India, where he met his guru and underwent a profound spiritual transformation. He disappeared from his old life, but he didn't stay in an ashram in the Himalayas. He returned to America, not as Professor Alpert, but as Ram Dass. He became a border dweller. He spent the rest of his life translating the deep wisdom of the East into a language that the skeptical, psychological mind of the West could understand. He wore the loose-fitting clothes of a spiritual seeker, but he spoke with the intellectual rigor of a Harvard academic. He was a perfect bridge. This is the new mode of being. When a border dweller returns, their fundamental operating system has changed. They are no longer driven by the ego's need for more money, more status, more recognition. Instead, they operate from a place of authenticity and service. Their primary question is no longer, what can I get, but what can I authentically give? This giving is not about fixing people or saving the world. The border dweller has done enough inner work to know that you cannot wake someone who is determined to sleep. Forcing your truth upon another is a form of violence. Preaching from a pedestal is just another performance, another ego game. So their service is more subtle, more magnetic. They don't push, they pull. They simply live their truth so transparently that their very presence becomes a question mark for others. They become a source of a different frequency in a world saturated with the frequency of fear and lack. A border dweller might be the artist whose work doesn't scream for attention, but whispers a deep truth that resonates in your bones. They might be the therapist who doesn't just offer coping mechanisms, but holds a space so safe that you can finally face your own shadow. They might be the teacher who doesn't lecture, but asks the questions that unlock the wisdom you already hold within. Or they might simply be the barista who looks you in the eye and truly sees you for a fleeting moment, reminding you of your own humanity. They might be the quiet coder in the office who refuses to participate in gossip, whose calm presence subtly changes the entire team's dynamic. They do not seek to lead a mass movement. They understand that true change happens one conscious interaction at a time. They are not interested in building a following. They are interested in fostering genuine connection. They are planting seeds, not building empires. Living on the border is not easy. It requires a constant, delicate balance. You must engage with the world's suffering without being drowned by it. You must speak a language the sleepwalkers can understand without betraying the depth of what you have seen. You must hold your center of peace while navigating systems built on anxiety and competition. It's like being a deep-sea diver who must learn to walk on land while still carrying the pressure and silence of the ocean within. This is why the integration in the hermit's crucible is so vital. Without that deep internal work, re-engaging with the world is dangerous. You risk being pulled back into the collective dream. You might become a spiritual egoist, using your newfound insights to feel superior to others. You might become a wounded healer, trying to fix in others what is still broken in yourself. But for the one who has done the work, returning is an act of love. They become a lighthouse. A lighthouse doesn't run all over the island looking for boats to save. It just stands, shining its light. It offers a beacon, a point of reference for those who are navigating the dark, stormy waters and are ready to look for a different shore. The border dweller understands that their presence is their purpose. Their authenticity is their activism. Their peace is their protest. They have moved beyond the duality of fighting against the old world and have begun the quiet, steady work of embodying a new one. But this new role, this life as a lighthouse, brings with it the final, most profound question of responsibility. Is it enough to simply stand and shine? Is finding your own peace the end of the journey? Or does the most courageous act of love require something more? Does it require not just shining a light, but helping to build a harbor for the ships that are looking for a new home? This brings us to the final and perhaps most vital question. If the old world, the world of performance and projection, is a ship taking on water, sinking under the weight of its own inauthenticity, what is the most loving thing a person can do? Should you stay on board, frantically bailing water with a thimble, trying to convince the sleepwalking passengers that the ship is indeed sinking? Or is the most responsible act to begin building lifeboats? For years, the awakened have been accused of selfishness. You're just escaping. You're abandoning your responsibility to change the system. It's a spiritual bypass, a retreat from the world's problems. And to that, the person who has completed their inner work has a quiet, clear response. You cannot pour from an empty cup. This is not an excuse. It is a fundamental law of energetics and consciousness. To stay engaged in a toxic system when you yourself are not yet whole is not noble. It is reckless. You will not heal the system. You will simply become another casualty of it. An unhealed person trying to heal others will inevitably spread their own unconsciousness. They will project their own unmet needs, their own unprocessed anger, their own shadow, all under the guise of helping. They will become one more sleeping person, dreaming that they are awake, trying to rouse other sleeping people by shouting in their dreams. This only creates more nightmares. No, the most loving, most responsible, and most radical thing you can do for the world is to first do the deep, often agonizing work of awakening fully yourself. It is to fill your own cup so completely that it naturally overflows. The hermit phase was never an abandonment. It was an apprenticeship. The disappearing was not an escape. It was the gathering of tools, the drawing of blueprints. And what are you building? Not a weapon to fight the old world, but a sanctuary to house the new one. The ultimate act of service is not to change the minds of those committed to the collective dream. It is to create safe, conscious spaces for those who are beginning to stir in their sleep. It is to build the harbors for the ships seeking a new shore. These are the new sanctuaries, and they are not necessarily buildings with steeples or domes. A sanctuary is any space where authenticity is the currency, where consciousness can breathe, and where the soul is valued over the role. This is already happening quietly on the margins. You see it in the rise of what are called intentional communities across America, groups of people leaving the mainstream to build new models of living based on shared values like sustainability, cooperation, and personal growth. They are experimenting with new ways to relate to the land, to each other, and to themselves. But a sanctuary can be much smaller and more accessible than that. It can be a circle of friends who commit to radical honesty, where you can share your fears and failures without judgment. It can be a business founded not on maximum profit, but on ethical principles and human well-being. It can be an online forum, a small corner of the internet, dedicated not to outrage and hot takes, but to deep, nuanced conversation. It can be a piece of art, a book, a song that creates a sanctuary in the mind of the person who experiences it, reminding them that they are not alone. It can even be the sacred space you create within your own home, a place of peace and clarity that acts as your charging station, allowing you to re-engage with the world from a place of fullness. The awakened are not disappearing forever. They are decentralizing. They are moving from the collapsing center to the creative periphery. They are no longer trying to climb the single rickety ladder of success offered by the mainstream. Instead, they are weaving a vast, interconnected network of alternatives at the grassroots level. They have understood that you do not change a dying system by fighting it. You change it by making it obsolete. You build something so beautiful, so true, and so nourishing that people willingly leave the old structure behind. So if you have felt this pull to disappear, to withdraw, to become quiet, I invite you now to reframe it. You are not running away. You are in training. You are not abandoning your post. You are being called to a new one. Your solitude has been your cocoon, your crucible, your sacred laboratory. And now you may be feeling the gentle nudge to return, not as you were, but as an architect. Your disappearing act was not the end of the story. It was the first act of a profound creative process. You were not running from the world. You were incubating a new one within yourself. And so this is my invitation to you. The final, most important step. Look at the life you are living in your own quiet corner of the world. What are you building? What is the one brick you can lay today for a more conscious, more authentic world? A brick is not a grand, finished cathedral. A brick is small, tangible, real. Maybe your brick is choosing not to engage in gossip at work today. Maybe it's the courage to have one truly honest conversation with a loved one. Maybe it's the discipline to turn off the noise and spend 30 minutes creating something, writing, painting, gardening. Maybe it's simply the act of being fully present with your child, creating a sanctuary of attention for them in a distracted world. These are the bricks. This is how a new world is built, not with a single loud revolution, but with a million quiet, conscious choices. In the comments below, I want you to share your brick. What is one small, authentic thing you are building, cultivating, or choosing in your life right now? Let's not just talk about this phenomenon. Let's become a living directory of it. Let's show each other the architecture of a more beautiful world, one brick at a time. Because you are not just a disappearing soul, you are a pioneer. You are a builder, and the world doesn't need you to save it. It needs you to be so fully and authentically yourself that you grant others the permission to do the same.